So here we are at the final few chapters. Thanks for sticking with me. Let's begin. At chapter 23, Bumper Carnival. Miss Chalice and Cuphead were driving away from the carnival in a borrowed bumper car, which was an unusual sight on the Inkwell Isles. Oh, sure, maybe these things happened in the big city, but here on the Isles, people were particular about the kinds of vehicles they let loose in their streets. Those being cars, trucks, buses, wagons, bicycles, roller skates, and boats that were afraid of the water. But as embarrassed as Cuphead was by all the honking and staring, they had bigger problems. Holy smoke, we got company, he said. He didn't say it was good company, and in fact, it was the other kind. Brinnybeard and Hopus piled up on the left side, and Jimmy and Miss Chimes pulled up on the right. They battled the little car between them like a ping-pong ball. "Hang on," Miss Chalice said. She steered to the left and bumped Brinnybeard. Then she spun the wheel to the right and bashed Jimmy. The three little cars bumped and bashed and batted and banged one another mercilessly as they raced down the road. Brinnybeard pulled in close. "Drop your anchor, you landlubbers," he shouted, and reached for Cuphead. Far from the other side, Miss Chimes came at Miss Chalice with his terrible cymbals. Eek, eek, eek. While Miss Chalice held the wheel, Cuphead moved from side to side, fighting back the intruders. This went on for a considerable distance, and then something happened that brought the greatest bumper car race in the history of the Inkwell Isles to a swift and sudden end. "Oh no," said Miss Chalice. It was an oh no moment if there ever was one. Up ahead, blocking the road, was a large carnival wagon. Standing in front of it was the whole gang. Beppy, Sally Stageplay, Calamaria, Fairlap, Pirouetta, the acrobats, the knife thrower, the human cannonball, the strongman, Caggy Carnation, the unicycling bear, the three turtles, Ernestine Elephant, and the derby-wearing duck. Considering they'd only been at the carnival for a couple hours, they made an impressive number of enemies. "What do we do now?" Miss Chalice asked. But Cuphead was out of ideas. They'd literally come to the end of the road. He was about to tell Miss Chalice the bad news when he felt something on his shoulder. This wasn't surprising. His coincidences had always shown up at times like these. Only when he looked, he didn't see a little winged Cuphead. He saw a little tin monkey. In fact, he saw a lot of little tin monkeys. Linked hand to hand and tail to tail, the monkeys formed a chain that led all the way to the sky. Cuphead and Miss Chalice looked up. "Mugman!" they cheered. There was Mugman, flying high overhead in one of the little airplanes from the kiddie ride. "Climb aboard," he said. Cuphead and Miss Chalice quickly shimmied up the chain of little monkeys and plopped into the airplane alongside Mugman. The angry crowd below shouted and hollered and used the kind of language you didn't expect from carnival people, but it didn't matter. Mugman just grinned and waved and steered into the nearest cloud. Everything was going to be all right. And that's the end of chapter 3. That was a short chapter. On chapter 24, The Great Escape. Or was it? You see, while most clouds are friendly, peaceful places open to everyone, Mugman had managed to find one cloud that wasn't. It was Hilda Berg's cloud. Hilda hadn't forgotten what Cuphead's ball had done to her garden, or how those roughhousing daydreams had floated up and ruined the neighborhood, and as it happened, she just spotted the troublemakers behind it all in her own backyard. Obviously, they hadn't learned their lesson, but she'd fixed that. And it would be a lesson they'd never forget. Cuphead was sitting back and enjoying the view. Not that there was much view to enjoy. They were inside a cloud, you know. When he had the oddest feeling they were being watched. It was ridiculous, of course. Who'd be watching them up here? He just put it out of his mind when, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimmer of something. At first he couldn't make out what it was, but as it came closer he realized, no, it couldn't be. It just couldn't be. But it was. "Remember the Arigolds!" Hilda shrieked. Without warning, the angry Zeppelin swooped in and fired. Rat-a-tat-tat-ta! Sploot, sploot, splat! A squishy spray of tomatoes hit the tiny plane. She's got a salad shooter," Miss Chalice yelled. Look out! Mugman swerved. A second later, a cucumber missile came streaking through the air, and Cuphead had to duck to avoid being veginated. That was too close. Let's get out of here, Cuphead shouted. Mugman wanted to oblige. Unfortunately, there was a problem with his wings. They were on fire. It seemed they'd been hit by some spicy jalapeno peppers, and if you'd ever had one, you know how dangerous they are. Still, they'd be all right as long as she didn't use a cantaloupe, Cuphead yelled. Mugman banked to the right, but it was too late. The melon clipped the plane's tail, sending it into a spin. By the time he pulled out of it, Hilda was on top of them. She flew in so close they could count the hairs in her spit curls. I told you what would happen if you ever crossed me again, she said, and now I'll show you what a Zeppelin can really do. They watched as Hilda pumped herself up bigger and bigger and bigger, and if there's one thing I can't stand, it's a blowhard, said Miss Chalice, and she poked Hilda with a needle. Yow! Hilda screamed. There was a sudden loud hissing noise, and Hilda began zipping through the air like a deflating balloon. I'll get you for this, she yelled. I'll get all of you! Same old Hilda. Cuphead and Miss Chalice couldn't help laughing, but apparently Mugman couldn't help it, because he wasn't laughing at all. He was listening. Sput, sput, sputter. What's that sound? Miss Chalice asked. The plane, he told her. We're going down. It turned out that Hilda's veggie assault had done more damage than they'd realized. If you know anything about kiddie ride planes, you know they can handle only so much nutrition. Which meant there was nothing left to do but jump, Mugman said. An instant later, Mugman, Miss Chalice, and Cuphead had bailed out of the tiny plane and were falling helplessly through space. Any ideas? Cuphead asked. We could make parachutes out of our underpants, Mugman said. Cuphead shook his head, and he looked over to Miss Chalice. Flap our arms like birds, she said. And that's what they did. It didn't stop their plunging, but it was good exercise and it helped to pass the time. Well, as you see, the three friends were in quite a predicament. That's what happens when you're flying around with your head in the clouds. You lose sight of the big picture, and in this case, the big picture was what was happening at that very moment down on the ground. You see, directly beneath them, a huge crowd had gathered in Pumpernickel Park for one of the largest birthday celebrations in the Inkwell Isles had ever seen. Elder Kettle was there, grinning from ear to ear, even though he was a little concerned that the children hadn't showed up yet. It wasn't like them. Oh well, he was sure they'd drop in any minute now. The important thing was that everyone had remembered his birthday, even Chef Saltbaker, who had just arrived with the cake. And what a cake it was! 12 layers high, each of them beautifully decorated with white candy flowers and sweet, creamy frosting. It was the fluffiest, sweetest, most beautiful cake the Inkwell Isles had ever seen. The candles up top turned into a showpiece, and Chef Saltbaker smiled as he wheeled in towards the guest of honor. My dear friend, Elder Kettle, Chef said, I have created something very special for you. May I present Splat, Splat, Splat! Chef Saltbaker's magnificent creation splattered like a freshly exploded watermelon. It wasn't supposed to, of course, but that's what happens when 3 late-arriving guests fall out of the sky and use it for a landing pad. All the guests covered in sweet, creamy frosting, which they swore was the most delicious thing they'd ever worn, and the trees were painted with decorative candy flowers. A huge gasp rose up from the crowd as the sticky, gooey skydivers crawled out of the bottom layer. For a moment, there was an uneasy silence, and then Mugman smiled. He had birthday candles where his teeth should be. Cuphead laughed. Miss Chalice laughed. Everyone laughed. Well, almost everybody. My cake! My beautiful cake! Chef Saltbaker cried. What have you done to my cake? As for Elder Kettle, he tried to look angry, but he just couldn't do it. He was too happy the 3 of them were all right, and that they'd made such a memorable entrance. Cuphead grinned and handed him a beautifully wrapped box. It immediately burst open, and out popped the 4-mel arrangement. It's your birthday, Elder Kettle, and we've come here to say we're all glad to be with you on this very special day. And now it's time for something that should give you quite a lift. For all your friends and neighbors, please enjoy the special gift. That was terrible. I apologize in advance for that. The mouse handed him the gold watch and chain, and when he put it on, it looked even more stately and distinguished than Cuphead had imagined. Everyone agreed it's the nicest watch they'd ever seen, and they congratulated Cuphead, Mugman, and Miss Chalice for finding the perfect present for Elder Kettle. "Thank you all so much. It's been a grand birthday," Elder Kettle said. And so Cuphead's story had a happy ending. At least it would have if it had ended right there. But of course it didn't. There was a little bit more to tell. Chapter 25, Double Trouble. Cuphead walked into the classroom with Mugman and Miss Chalice and put his book beside the desk, but he did not sit down. How could he? His desk was already occupied by him. "Cuphead?" Professor Lucien said. There was an awkward silence. "Someone seems to be sitting in your desk, Cuphead." "Oh, so it would seem," said Cuphead. "Curious thing, wouldn't you say?" "Oh, absolutely," Cuphead agreed. "And what's even more curious," the teacher continued, "is that Mugman and Miss Chalice also have someone in their desks. Isn't that odd?" "Very odd," said Cuphead. "Spooky," said Miss Chalice. "Oh, it's a stumper, all right," said Mugman. The professor strolled down the row of desks. He wasn't going to make this easy. "Now, can any of you give me an explanation as to how this happened?" "Doppelganger," said Cuphead. "Evil twin," said Miss Chalice. "Poorly devised escape plan that one of us deeply regrets," said Mugman. Cuphead and Miss Chalice gave him a look. "Very good, Mugman," Lucien said. "I think you're on to something." The three of them stared at the floor. Even though they had a good reason for doing what they did, it was a pretty dirty trick. "We're sorry, Professor. We couldn't have done it. We shouldn't have done it. But can I ask a question?" Cuphead said. "Why are they wearing dunce hats?" It was true. The fake versions of Cuphead, Miss Chalice, and Mugman were all wearing long, cone-shaped hats with the word dunce written on the side. Lucien smiled. "Oh, those?" he said. "They were earned by not knowing a single answer to the pop quiz." "Pop quiz," said Cuphead. "They insisted I give them one," Lucien explained. Cuphead, Mugman, and Miss Chalice turned and stared at Mac. Mac gulped. "I may have gotten carried away," he said. At that moment, the door to the classroom opened, and in walked Principal Silverworth. "Ah, you're just in time," Lucien told him. "We were just discussing what to do with our sudden outbreak of look-alikes." Silverworth wiped his monocle, stepped forward, and raised a finger in the air. "Well, ordinarily, I'd say a situation like this calls for 1 week's detention, but since we're seeing double, 2 weeks' detention it is," Professor Lucien said. The three friends looked at one another. Their mouths fell open. "Did you just say 2 weeks?" Cuphead moaned. "Gee whiz, Professor, He looked at the professor. He looked at the Principal Silverworth. He looked at the dummy in his chair. It was a ridiculous-looking thing. Cuphead pulled the hat from his head and put it on his own. "I'm a dunce," he said, and then he laughed. The next 2 weeks would be hard, but Cuphead couldn't complain. Elder Kettle had a great birthday, and that's all that mattered. And if he had to have detention, he couldn't ask for 2 better friends to have it with. He, Miss Chalice, and Mugman would get through it together. He was sure of that, because together they could get through anything. And that's the end of that. That's a wrap. Fin. Boom. Bingo, bango, bongo. That's the end. If you've watched all these videos and paid attention to the book, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for watching. It's an excellent book. If you don't have the patience to watch the videos, that's totally understandable. I honestly can't recommend this bad boy enough. It's very easy to read, very easy to skim through. Pretty long for the subject of what it's covering. It's based on the Cuphead video game, which is a fantastic video game if you haven't played it yet. Yeah, no. Thanks again, guys. Take it easy out there. Stay safe. And I can't thank you enough for watching all these vids. Even this vid. Even 1 or 2 vids. Hey, I appreciate it, alright? Take it easy. Cheers.